This interview was never supposed to exist. I was warned right away. If you reveal this, they'll think you're insane, or a liar, or a witch, as has already happened more than once. But I was tired of staying silent, not for myself, for those who also feel that beyond this reality there is something more. For those who wake up in the middle of the night, not from a nightmare, but from the sensation that someone is watching, who feel a gaze on them and know it's not a human, who have heard a voice, inside but clearer than any external sound. I, Sylvia Browne, medium, psychic, author of books, a woman who was adored and hated, and I won't tell you a fairy tale. I'll tell you what I never even said on Larry King Live, because it was too much, even for me. It happened in 2004, after one of the hardest sessions of my life. I came home drained, burned out from the inside. I always paid a price for what I saw. People thought I just felt, but every time I made contact with those who had passed, a part of me stayed there. And that night I just collapsed. No strength, no prayer, no protection. I fell asleep. I don't remember how. But I woke up, not in my bedroom, and not even in my body. I was standing on a stone floor. The air was thick, as if made of ash. There was no light, but I could see. I wasn't seeing with my eyes. I saw as if from within. Everything was grey, not a colour, a state. And then I realised, this isn't a dream. This isn't a vision. This is a transition. A man stood before me, tall, faceless. But I knew he was a guardian, not an angel, not a demon, simply one who accompanies. He didn't speak, but I heard his thoughts as if they were my own. "Are you ready?" he asked, and I, not knowing for what, said, "Yes." We walked, past shadows, past those who screamed without sound. I couldn't stop, I couldn't help, I just walked, because I knew I would be shown what I needed to see, what I had warned others about all my life, and now had to witness for myself. We didn't need an elevator, or stairs. It was like sliding down a funnel, and the lower we went, the colder it became, but not in the body, in the soul. And then we stopped. A room, without walls, without a ceiling, but still a space. And there they were, those who had left but hadn't gone, those who were stuck, not because they were punished, but because they hadn't let go. A man who shot himself, still holding an invisible gun in his hand. A woman blaming herself for her child's death, again and again. A young man who died of an overdose, not understanding that he's dead. This is not hell. This is a loop. It's what I've always called trapped souls. They don't hear God. They don't feel the light. They are within themselves, in pain, in repetition. No one is punishing them. They are their own punishment. And then I asked, "Why did you show me this again?" And I heard the answer, but not from him, from something higher. Because you forgot. Because you began to believe in words, not in essence. I was shaking, not physically, inside. I saw how easy it is to become one of them, how easy it is to stay there. Just one thought. I am unworthy. And that's it. You no longer see the light. You no longer hear the call. And then they showed me something else. They didn't warn me about what they would show next. It wasn't hell, not a grey hall, not a soul vortex. It was a place I once called in my notes the plateau between. Not light, not darkness, something in between. But the most important thing, they were there. The ones I hadn't seen before. The ones who knew. They had no bodies, but I could feel them, as if every thought in that space was a living being. And those thoughts, they touched me, Not aggressively, not painfully, but as if scanning. One of them, I don't know what else to call it, came closer. I didn't see eyes, didn't hear a voice, but I understood it was a woman, or a soul that had once been a woman. She spoke not in words, but in knowing. Simply placed an entire meaning into me, a whole block of awareness, and I cried because I remembered. I remembered how in 1999 I told a woman during a session, "Your son is on the other side. He's at peace." I said it, thinking I knew. But now I understood. I hadn't felt it then. I was just repeating. And that entity, let's call it that, said, "You were looking for truth." But then you began to look for answers, and those are not the same. That tore me apart, because I knew it was true. At some point my books, my shows, my public appearances became louder than the silence inside. And in the silence, there had always been the truth. I had replaced it with words. And then, in front of my eyes, my life played out, not like a movie, but like reliving. I saw myself sitting on a show, millions watching me. I smiled, but inside, fear. What if I fail? What if I don't say the right thing? What if I'm exposed? And the voice, or the thought, said, "You knew not everything was true, but you were afraid to be silent. And now silence is no longer an option." I thought that was it. But they didn't let me go. They showed me one more thing. It was a place, it had no shape, but it was warm, and the light was soft. And in that place I felt something I had never felt in my entire life. Complete acceptance, not for success, not for knowledge, not for gifts, but simply for being me. I heard something inside calm down. All the voices, all the expectations, all the pain grew quieter. It felt like an embrace, but without a body. And in that embrace I heard, "This is why you came, not to know, but to remember." It wasn't a revelation, it was a return. I remembered that the soul is not a tool, not a channel, not an antenna, but the essence. And if you are not connected to it, nothing else matters. When I opened my eyes, I didn't immediately understand where I was. I was lying on the couch, light already pushing through the curtains, and the air was different, thick, warm, as if someone else was with me. I got up, sat at the table and began to write. Not a book, not a speech, just wrote everything I had seen. And when I reread it, I understood this can't be published, because it wasn't content, it was a confession. I folded the pages, hid them in a drawer, and then a month later I burned them, because I knew if the time comes, I will say it. Myself, without paper. That time is now. I thought all the most important things had already been said, but as it turned out, that was only the beginning. The following days felt like they were wrapped in fog. I lived as usual, answered calls, consulted people, smiled, but everything felt different. I knew that they, the ones who had shown me the plateau between, hadn't left. I felt them, not beside me, but inside. It wasn't possession. It wasn't madness. It was as if something inside you had been activated, as if you'd always carried an antenna that never caught a signal, and now it does. I began to see between the lines, to feel behind the words. A woman would come and say, "I can't forget my husband," and I would hear, "I can't forgive myself for being happy without him." A man would say, "My life is falling apart," and I would feel, "I've long abandoned my true self, and now everything else is falling away." And the scariest part, I began to feel the same in myself, in my books, in my shows, in my fame. I don't want you to think I blame myself. No, I said many things that truly helped people, but I realized one thing. When you become the voice of truth, you can very quickly become its substitute. People stop seeking God and they start seeking you, and you are just a person. And then one night, again between sleep and wakefulness, they came, not with bodies, with meaning. I was lying in bed, and suddenly it felt like I dropped out of time. Everything around me disappeared. No light, no sounds, only peace and a thought. Are you ready to hear what you saw? I understood. They had returned, not to show, but to instill. And then everything I had seen began to form into knowledge. First, the soul is not born in the body. It enters, like a traveler, like an actor into a role. But it is not the role. This is important, because many get lost thinking they are what they do. But you are not a mother, not a husband, not an accountant, not a singer. You are a soul playing these roles to remember who you are beyond them all. Second, hell is not a place. It's a state, a vibration. And you can end up there while still alive. I've seen people whose eyes shine, but inside there is already darkness, because they've become disconnected from their essence. Hell doesn't begin after death. Hell is when you live in lies and know it, but continue anyway. Third, there is no punishment. There are consequences. What we call karma doesn't come as revenge. It comes as a mirror. You threw, it reflected. You turned away, you were turned away from. Everything is a lesson, not a judgment. Fourth, no one leaves forever. All souls return, but not for punishment, for completion. You are not cursed. You are in process. And if you are reading this, hearing this, you are not here by accident. You are remembering. And finally, fear is the main barrier to evolution. People don't go deep because they're afraid of what they'll find, but only in depth is freedom. Only in silence is the voice. Only in truth is the way out. When this knowledge entered me, I didn't cry. I just became quiet. Everything inside aligned, as if my inner pendulum, which had been swinging constantly, finally came to rest. I opened my eyes, and it was already early morning darkness, not yet dawn. I got up, went to the kitchen, made tea and just sat. No thoughts, no goals. I knew now I would speak. But not for interviews, not for a book, but so that someone who was on the verge of giving up could hear. You are not alone, you haven't forgotten. You are just at the threshold. And from that moment, everything changed. I began to speak, but differently, not like before, with calculation, with a gentle smile, with polished phrases. I began to speak as it is, without embellishment, without trying to please the audience. I said what I felt. Sometimes it was strange. People would come to me expecting the familiar Sylvia, the one who told them where their missing relatives were, or what would happen to them in 3 months, and I would look and remain silent, because I knew they came for hope, but were not ready for truth. And sometimes I did speak, carefully, like the first time you open your heart. I said, "You're not looking for an answer. You're looking for permission to feel. But you don't need permission. You need to stop and remember." Some were grateful. Some cried. Some left disappointed. I got used to it. Truth is not always gentle, but it always sets you free. I remember one case. A woman came. Her daughter had died. She held a photo, hands trembling. "Tell me, is she okay?" she asked. I looked at the picture and felt my heart tighten, because the girl's soul was nearby, but she felt heavy, as if caught in waiting. I asked the woman, "Do you blame yourself?" She broke down. "Yes, because I didn't listen to her. I was busy. I thought we had more time." And then I said, "She's not waiting for your forgiveness. She's waiting for you to forgive yourself." These words didn't come from my mind. They just were. I didn't feel like a medium. I was simply a conduit between one soul and another. And then I understood. That's why I had that journey. Not to prove that I see more, but to stop being afraid to say less, softer, deeper. I turned down several TV shows, interviews that asked, "So tell us, will there be a World War III?" People wanted sensations, and I couldn't give them any more. I knew the price was silence within, and that silence was now my most sacred space. They began to call me withdrawn. Some colleagues said, "Sylvia is tired." Some hinted I had lost my edge, some that I was ill. I didn't justify myself, because I knew if I started explaining, I would begin playing a role again, and I'd had enough of that. That's when I decided this interview should be my confession, but not of sins, of transition. I am no longer a seer. I am a woman who has experienced contact with the beyond and survived. To say one thing, everything we search for is not out there, not in predictions, not in answers, not in future dates, but in the ability to sit in silence and feel that you are not alone. That behind you is light, even if you can't see it. That hell is not a sentence, it's a lesson. That death is not punishment, it's a process. That love is not a reward, it's a state. And if you are able to feel that, you don't need anyone to say, "You're right." You already know. And all of this, I didn't learn on air, not on camera, not among fans, but there, in a place where there are no cameras, no books, no names, there, where there is only you and the truth. You want me to tell you what it's like after death? I will. It's different. Not because truth is different, but because you are. The soul doesn't end up in a standardized space. It arrives in a reflection. And if you spent your whole life running from yourself, you'll be shown who you were running from. If you lied to yourself, they'll show you how many times you could have chosen truth. And if you lived with love, you'll be met with love. Not with images, not with winged angels, but with a state, a vibration, a light that doesn't blind, but sinks into you as if you were transparent. And in that light, everything you hid becomes visible. That's why I no longer believe in rewards and punishments. The soul is not a student in school. It doesn't get A's or F's. It's a seeker, a pilgrim, sometimes lost, sometimes tired, but always in motion. And yes, there are souls that get stuck, in anger, in fear, in guilt. I've seen them, not once. They're not in hell. They're trapped in themselves, in endless loops of pain, and only one thing can pull them out: memory. The memory of who they were before fear, before pain, before hate, because no soul is born bad, not one. I didn't learn this from books, not from spiritual teachers, but from there. So, if you're listening or reading this, remember, you didn't come here to be perfect. You came to be real, to feel, to grow, to make mistakes, to laugh, to forgive, to fall, to rise, and one day to remember, that's all. Don't fear silence. That's where the ones who can't be heard by ears are speaking. Don't fear feeling, even when it hurts. Pain is not punishment, it's a call. And don't be afraid to ask questions, Because the moment you sincerely ask, the answer is already moving toward you, and when it arrives, don't run. Embrace it, even if it shatters everything you believed. That just means it's time to believe deeper. I don't want you to believe in me. I don't want to be placed on a pedestal. I'm just a voice, a woman who spoke to the dead and one day realized the dead aren't the ones who left. The dead are those who are still alive, but no longer feel. You don't have to be one of them. Do you hear me? You are not dead. Even if you feel empty inside, even if you're tired, even if you believe in no one. You are alive, and you are not an accident. When I saw the light, I didn't feel joy. I felt silence, certainty, as if someone said, "You are home, but you have to go back." I came back to remind you, not because I'm special, but because you are important. If you're still here, you are not finished. Remember that, accept it, and live so that when your soul finds itself there again, it won't be afraid. It will say, "I remember. I'm ready." This is the end of my monologue, but not the end of my message, because if you're hearing this, it's already working inside you. If you felt this was more than just a video, don't stay silent. Write in the comments what resonated with you the most. Your words might help someone else remember. Click like, not for the number, but to say, "I'm here. I hear it too." Share this video with someone who's on the edge. It might save not just you, and subscribe, because we're not done. We're just beginning to remember who we really are.